Data center impacts. Okay, you deploy this in a big way, you are going to impact your data center. You're going to put more servers in the data center, which means more electricity, more cooling, more storage, all those types of things. So those are things that have to be taken into account when you go in. What's next for us? We are going to spend this year looking at VMware View 4 and Zen Desktop 4. We're working with a couple of the other business areas. They're rolling out big pilots of this stuff. We're just going to kind of scam onto what they're doing to see how well it's working for them. PC over IP is a new protocol. It's based on some work that's done by a company called Teradici. What I've seen so far in the labs and stuff is pretty impressive. However, the problem with Teradici early on was it was like a one-to-one relationship. You had to have one piece of hardware in your client and one piece of hardware in your server, and those two could talk to one another, but that was it. They've now got to the point where they actually have a software client that will run against hardware, and you can have a many-to-one relationship. We'll spend some time looking at that. If it works, then it eliminates the need to do the USB redirect and the video offloading, multimedia redirection goes away because they handle all that inside their protocol. Type 1 hypervisors for mobile users. This is how we're going to deal with the mobile user, or attempt to deal with the mobile user. There are a couple of Type 1 hypervisors currently available today on the market. We've spent some time looking at them, but they're I don't know, I call them pre-alpha. You can't manage them. There's some real issues with them, so we will spend some time looking at that. We have to solve the mobile issue user. We are taking our application virtualization production, our application virtualization that we did last year, we are moving it into production. We're comfortable enough with it today that we can move it into a production environment. We have a 16-bit application that runs the shop floor in one of our other locations in California. We can't get rid of it for 2 more years. Typically 16-bit applications don't like to play inside Vista. That's the environment they're moving to. We've been able to take this commercial tool, take the commercial application, wrap it inside of ThinApp, and deploy it out to 1,600 desktops with no problems. Runs in that environment. Yes, sir?
From the time that you get a request to put a new application online, to the time that it's actually delivered, something like Google Earth, let's say you get a request from Google Earth, it's approved, how long is it from the time that you start to the time that you can actually deploy on that?
Depends on the application, depends on how the consultants answer, right? Depends on the application, depends on how integrated it is with other things. So Adobe, for instance, Adobe Reader, which doesn't really integrate with a whole lot of other things, we can take a brand new version of Adobe from the point in time we get it to the point in time we can start rolling it out. It's about 4 hours. Okay, and that just depends on how busy the guys in the image lab are. Okay, and we've had to do that on numerous occasions, obviously, with all of the patches that have been released for Adobe. It was an interesting thing that I meant to mention earlier with Adobe, and I took a patched version of Adobe and gave it to the forensics guys and said, I want you to run every piece of malware that you have, a PDF-based malware that would whack an Adobe user.
Are they done yet?
Yeah, they finished with everything we had, okay? But basically, we ran all this stuff in inside of a virtualized Adobe application. The net effect is that every time you ran a piece of malware that was bad, it did blow up the virtualized application, but none of it leaked into the operating system. So there were no hooks set in the operating system, none of that stuff. So it is at least with Adobe, it's a good way to know that you've got a piece of malware because Adobe blows up, but you also have protected the operating system and the machine itself. None of the badness leaches out into the machine. So, yeah. Okay. And finally, we also are going to spend some time looking at remote desktop services for Windows 2008. There's a lot of stuff that's been put in here that we were interested in looking at in terms of it's the stuff that we've had to do third-party applications for and that kind of stuff to bolt onto the existing infrastructure in order to be able to do some of the stuff we need to do. A lot of that stuff has showed up in 2008 R2. It may appear to be sort of a step backwards because that is a presentation virtualization versus a desktop virtualization scheme. I don't know. We'll take a look at it, see what happens with that. Okay. People have had any other questions? Yeah. All right, I'll repeat your question. Thank you for reminding me. Yeah.
Second question, which were the type 1 hypervisors that you looked at?
We haven't looked at it. The only we've looked at. What are the type 1 hypervisors that we've looked at? To say the truth, I don't recall the names because we haven't actually started doing any work with them. I just know that there are two of them out there. So if you go Google type 1 hypervisor for laptop or desktop, they'll pop up. I just don't remember the names off the top of my head. Yes, sir.
You said that RDP you looked at, and what were the problems with it that you faced?
Pardon?
What weren't the problems?
Oh, yeah. Well, so the question is, what were the problems with RDP when we looked at RDP? It's just it doesn't do as well in terms of the video piece, and it's chattier than ICA in terms of how much has to go back and forth between the machines, and it just wasn't as efficient as ICA was with respect to moving keyboard, video, mouse. Yeah. So. Yes.
Have you found that incident detection is easier with virtualization?
The question is, have we found this incident detection being easier? Define what you mean by incident detection. So we're talking about the same thing.
Well, in terms of finding if intrusion attempts.
Well, like I said, since we have right now we have such a small footprint with this stuff, I don't have an answer because we haven't noticed anything specific in the 60 or so users that we've got, or 120 or so users that we've deployed so far. So we're running the same tools in this environment, with the exception of desktop backup and full disk encryption that we would normally run on any of our other laptops. In other words, the IPS, the IDS, the firewall, all that stuff is still running in that environment. As far as I know, we haven't had anybody try to actually attack that particular environment. So. How am I doing on time? Oh, 10:52. Okay, go ahead.
What has been the cost of Citrix? Because I know Citrix can add up quite a bit with licensing and everything. So how does that scale with, doing fat clients versus benefits?
I hate to talk cost because of the fact that who I work for and how big we are. We don't, we get numbers different than most other people do. But if you add the whole thing up, we've got to get to the point where we're deploying. Over the last 6 years, we spent around $600,000, maybe close to $750,000 in just doing this work. Okay, if you put the whole thing together, when we do the ROI and all that stuff, we've got to get to the point where we've got to deploy this out to about 2,500 desktops before it starts making money or before it starts actually saving us a lot of money to make it worthwhile.
From 60 to how many?
We're going to scale from, if we do it, if we get my way about it, we'll scale from 60 to about 10,000. Yeah, and that's just in my business area. Other business areas are watching real close what we're doing. So ultimately this could scale from, scale up to 100,000 plus.
Awesome.
Yeah. So about 7 more minutes. Any other questions? Yes.
Thinking back to the beginning of your presentation, you're describing some of the attacks that you're seeing.
Mhm.
And this might feed back into the incident question where with a population of 60, you might not be able to say, but as you scale this up, how are you picturing that this is going to help address that problem that you described with the USB drive migrating around and collecting data?
In that particular instance, I'm sorry. I was waiting for one of those. I haven't got one all day. Anyway, now I got to remember the question. The question was how do we anticipate this is going to impact our the number of incidents we see, or incident response type thing if we deploy this with respect to the USB things. One of the things about the way this is deployed is that even if somebody does come in and somehow, say a guy walks in with a USB drive, plugs it into one of the thin clients, it infects that particular image. When he logs off, that image is blown away. So anything that goes with any changes that were made to that particular image are gone now. They're flushed, and when he logs back in, he gets a brand new image. Okay. So that's the real draw. There is the idea is that look, we're gonna start basically resetting the machines back to a known good state at least once every 24 hours. Okay, so your exposure is